I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been taught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been broke.
Good afternoon, good evening from where I am in France. Good morning. This is Dove Tusman, and you're back on Equal Footing. Tonight we want to talk about relationships, namely conflict in relationships, and more specifically conflict in romantic relationships with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your spouse, your lover. How do you keep love alive in the fog of battle when you are vehemently disagreeing? When there's been a breach of trust, perhaps, where you can't stand the other, where you're just ships crossing in the night when it comes to conveying what you're feeling or getting resolution around an issue. This is really the source problem around couples therapy. It's part of the human condition. It's no secret that divorce rates have gone up dramatically over the last several generations. There's an increasing intolerance for even temporal unhappiness. There's a therapist that works with relationship issues known around the world named Esther Perel, who I've quoted before on the show, who attributes increasing rates of breakup and relationships lasting less time everywhere in the world, Western world, developing world, to not only she does talk about the kind of online reality of people being able to find someone else, so to speak, or trade left or trade up or whatever it might be, but she also points to a different type of impatience that we have, an inability to cope with the difficult stuff and a desire to just go to happier shores all the time, whether it has to do with relationships or professional opportunities. We seem to hop from one thing to another more than ever before. In Judaism, we believe that the core of happiness and stability as a human being is to be in a family unit. And once in a family unit, it's all about peace in the home. Everything blossoms from that. Shalom bayit, shalom bayit. The idea that if you have peace in the home front, that you can be successful in other areas. Whether it's studying Torah, making money, having an impact in the world, tikkun olam, having a healing impact on the human community. But it all starts with shalom bayit, with peace in the home. Oh, were it so easy. You know what we did tonight? Instead of bringing in a therapist and a rabbi, which is often a formula that we use, I think successfully, we decided to have a personal conversation. Who's we? Leah and myself. Our wonderful producer for this show for years, if you've been listening carefully, you know is also my wife. I am a partner to her on this show and in life, and it isn't always easy in either arena. I'm lucky in a sense. Some would say cursed. I would say lucky to have as my spouse a relationship therapist. My wife is a clinical psychologist, and she specifically works on couples issues, relationship issues, and a lot on conflict resolution. So the first thing I'm going to do is welcome her to the program like I would any guest and tell you that she's been trained in the U.S. and France. You can find some of her work at, she has a website for her therapy work with couples and individuals that is leahtusman.com, that she has really focused in her career development on the alternative relationship structures that are having increased prevalence out there. She works with LGBTQ couples. She works with couples that are exploring and have open relationship structures. She works with past relationship trauma, PTSD that affects people's ability to be close and to love enduringly and effectively. And I'm a huge fan in every way. Leah, you often give color commentary on the show, and it's now really fun to have you in front of the mic and directly, I'm not going to say sparring, but directly attacking the issue.
Thank you, Dov. I don't think I've ever heard you introduce me that way. That feels so funny, but really good.
Which part? Which part felt funny to you?
The fact where you said you were my biggest fan. Sometimes when we fight, it doesn't feel that way.
Well, in the spirit of treating you like I would any other guest, I'll say to please speak up a little bit so we can hear you okay. Yeah. Well, let's actually start there. I think that there's this idea, and you tell me whether you think it's a myth or not, that all we need is love. That if you've got love, a relationship will endure. And I don't think there's any doubt at any point in our relationship that we know that the other loves us. Is that enough?
Oh, okay. We start with a tough question. From a producer perspective, I think that's great. From a partner perspective, I think, first of all, every couple can survive on what they choose to survive on. But I think it's a little idealistic or perhaps naive to think you can survive on love alone. We live in a society where we need a lot of resources and we need a lot of financial stability in order to raise a family. And saying, oh, we have love, we have it all, isn't really fair to the concept of the modern family today. But an essential part of it.
Seems to me that the emphasis on love is a modern idea, not that it hasn't been a romantic kind of narrative throughout most cultures. You can go back to sources like the Bhagavad Gita and ancient texts, of course, the Torah. There's lots of love stories, but the idea that this Disney idea that happiness, ever after seems pretty modern. Like if you look at our source texts in the Jewish faith, there's a lot of talk about kind of compatibility when it comes to couples, and there's a lot of kind of arranged or semi-arranged marriages in Torah and amongst our patriarchs and matriarchs, and there's a lot of comprehension when partners go kind of off the derrick, so to speak, off the path. And it seems like, marriage from a Torah perspective, from a Jewish wisdom perspective, it seems like love is important, but it doesn't often get kind of primary billing.
Yes, yeah, you're very true with the assessment that love is a modern concept. Or all you need is love is a modern concept. We've seen it in the last, I'd say, 40, 45 years, this new trend of needing to feel completed by a different person that is your partner, and not being able to be happy by yourself, or needing validation, needing to be seen in a certain way, needing to be perceived in a certain way, and needing that love to kind of validate you, to make you feel whole, to make you feel as if everything's okay even when it's not. But because love is a modern concept in this particular sense, obviously it's a little tongue-in-cheek, it's also divorce is a very modern concept. We see more and more women being in comparable pay positions as men, fair wages, and single mothers are just as able as single fathers to raise families. So I think we're kind of divorcing ourselves from this concept of love is all we need, just given the trends.
So I want to distinguish between, I want to dig in on this concept of validation and completion. I've heard you talk to me about that. I've heard you talk to others around giving advice that a healthy relationship is one where you're not looking to complete yourself. You feel whole without your partner, and then your partner enhances your happiness. Whereas when you kind of look for fulfillment and happiness in the relationship, that often doesn't work, or almost formulaically won't work. Is that? I apologize for my amateur Psych 101, but is that a watering down or a reasonable summary of your view?
Reasonable enough.
So, with respect to us, and so just so listeners can really feel like we're being raw and vulnerable and talking through these issues, not in theory but in practice, do you feel when we're in a conflictual situation, mm-hmm. How does that feed in terms? How does this concept of looking for completion and validation from the other fit into the conflict?
You mean regarding us personally?
It's a general point, but yeah, using us as an example.
Right. Well, I think, first of all, validation can be also a good thing. I don't think it's certainly a bad thing. I am just an advocate of feeling comfortable in your own body and your own skin as yourself, so then you can be comfortable in a relationship. I think there's a certain freedom that comes in being okay with things not being okay or not working out that gives you the power to stay in a relationship. And it's paradoxical, but I truly believe in it. I think feeling comfortable feeling comfortable in your own body makes your relationship stronger. And also, it's really difficult for people to grow up together and coexist in the same ways that they have for all these years. You know, people evolve and adapt, and what you need validation this one time is what you needed validation 2 years ago. And I think we don't hold as much space for that anymore. We're just giving people the opportunity to grow and kind of teach us where they want more love poured into them.
So sometimes the challenge that I have when I talk to my own therapist, I see a therapist once a week, as you know, or when I hear you talk about these issues, is I get a little bit lost in the jargon, mm-hmm. and I'm going to be maybe uncomfortably blunt about it. Mm-hmm. Let me just bounce a couple things out for you to make sure I understand. When you talk about not that the strength, let me try to hear this correctly or say it back to you correctly, that it helps to you can be in a stronger relationship or be in a better state in the relationship if you're not always afraid of it kind of being over. Mm-hmm. If you realize I'll be okay without this person, and if you feel that, not that you don't want to be with the person, mm-hmm. But if you feel I'll be all right, then you kind of handle whatever temporal conflict might be going on better. Is that what you're saying?
You have a higher chance of handling temporal conflict, I would say.
I like that. I mean, I think that's really good advice because it's really challenging when you're in the spiral of a really bad fight or you're feeling really misunderstood by your partner, and you combine that with the feeling that comes from the dependency around the relationship and feeling like, okay, my life is over if this isn't working, you just spiral. And it's not effective in terms of getting to a solution around whatever you might be, arguing about or disagreeing about either.
Yeah, but also getting more raw and personal here with all of our listeners, it can also be a sign of codependence. Like, high independence is not okay either, because then you're just defending yourself from future hurt while under the mask of saying, hey, I'm okay no matter what. Healthy love is a love that you feel afraid of losing, and that is totally normal and totally okay. The people we love in our lives, we want to be with us all the time, or in good health, God willing, forever. So this feeling of, hey, I don't need you to feel complete, while it's a healthy sentiment to have, to feel whole in your own body, it also means hyper-independence, and therefore this fear, this deep-rooted fear of abandonment, and having to teach yourself how to mask that fear of eventual future hurt.
I think, if I captured you correctly, you're saying don't overdo it. Yes. It's important to know, listen, I'm going to survive if this fight means the end of the relationship, or I'm going to be okay at the end of the day if I'm alone. But if you walk around with that as your baseline, and anytime something comes up, it's like, well, I'm okay, I don't need this. That's obviously kind of a pathological relationship dynamic. Now, we're going to take a break, but I really like actually getting into some of these words, because I think anybody who even has had a passing interest in these types of issues has heard about codependency and looking for validation outside of yourself and so forth. But it can get a little jargony, and so I want to talk a little bit more about that after the break, if that's all right. Now, we'd love to hear from you. So let us know what's going on in your relationship. This show is about conflict resolution, de-escalating from moments of tension, healing from arguments and disagreements and breaches of trust. This is obviously, we're getting really personal here. You've got a husband and wife on the line. We're lucky that Leah is a psychotherapist that works on couples issues, but we're also, opening up and using our own relationship as an example. So do the same, if you would. There are two ways you can participate. You can call in live. You can use your real name or a pseudonym if you like. Please be patient. We're in Europe at the moment, so we've got our radio engineer who's attending to the studio and the lines. You may have to let it ring. That's 718-303-9090. 718-303-9090 to call in live. You can also text or WhatsApp in a question or comment to a different number. Don't call this one live. This is for texting or WhatsApping, 917-428-4062. That's 917-428-4062. And we'll be right back.
And it was all yellow.
Equal Footing has been brought to you for a long while by Manhattan Medical. Manhattan Medical is an organization that holds the same principle we do on the show, which is shine a light on the tough stuff. Don't be afraid to talk about it. There's no shame in the difficulties that we face in our lives. Perhaps the only shame is in not confronting them directly. In the case of Manhattan Medical, we're talking about erectile dysfunction. Erectile dysfunction can be very destabilizing to couples. It can feel shaming and embarrassing. There are solutions out there, and it's good to know that it affects the large majority of men at some point in their lifetimes. Manhattan Medical understands this and understands that there are enduring remedies for erectile dysfunction. Manhattan Medical uses the Gainswave therapy method. It's a method that's non-invasive, it's surgery-free, and it's painless, and it does not involve pills that a lot of people have side effects from, comorbidities, and cannot take. Manhattan Medical's Gainswave therapy has a long-term effect and it works for an excess of 95% of patients. So write this number in your phone, and I'm going to tell you what you say when you call so you can get a discount. Manhattan Medical's number for their erectile dysfunction cure is 888-ED-CURE-9. That's 888-ED-CURE-9. In numbers, that's 888-332-8739. I'm going to give the number out one more time, but first I'm going to tell you that if you call Manhattan Medical and you tell them that you heard about the erectile dysfunction therapy that they offer on the Equal Footing radio show, you will get a $250 value free consult. And you can get that consult from anywhere in the United States. You don't have to be in Manhattan or in the New York area. So one more time, the number for Manhattan Medical's erectile dysfunction treatment, and operators are standing by, is 888-332-8739.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on tight. And I've been taught, but I'm keeping on.
All right, you're back on. I'm here with my wife and our producer, Leah. Let's define for a second this concept of codependency and independence, I guess, in relationships. You hear that a lot. What does it mean to be codependent?
First, I'll start with what it means to be independent. So, by the word itself, independent, to not be dependent off or on. It's this full autonomy and control over one's thoughts and feelings without influence of your partner or other parties in what your inner feelings or your inner world is. That is independent, to be independent in a relationship. That doesn't mean not influenced, but not controlled by. Now, codependence is the opposite of that. It's this, it's the feeling that you are not okay without your partner being okay. Or in a situation, you put more emphasis on your partner's feelings over your own. Your partner controls your emotional world more than you control your emotional world. Codependence, by the way, can also mean, hey, listen, I'm leaving you, than staying in a relationship and trying to control it because you don't feel whole without it. So there's various examples of codependence, but I think a classic one that that I can say on air is attending and not being able to attend an event alone or function as an individual in a society without your partner being present. And I, on air, am claiming that I am codependent when it comes to certain things. After you've been with someone for a long time and you've shared your life, it's hard for me to be fully independent in that relationship. What about you, Joe?
Well, first, definitionally, is there a third pole, so to speak? Is it about you're either independent or codependent in the relationship? Is there a third one? Or those both sounded like there was a degree to which they were unhealthy. What's the healthy association, or is it like a version of those two?
I think a good relationship has some interdependence. That means depending on and to each other for certain things that you can't be able to do alone. So I think that would be the third version, called interdependence in your partner.
That's what we should aspire to be, is interdependent. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, when it comes to conflict resolution, which is
By the way, see how he evaded my question about his dependency?
Oh, I didn't mean to. I think this is the first relationship in my life where I've felt codependent. I think that in general, I've probably had a unhealthy degree of independence in relationships and prior in my life. I think in our better moments, and most of the time, I guess I feel interdependent, which of course there's tons of interdependence in a relationship, and that was a bit of a setup question because I have heard of that term, and I know that's what one should aspire to be, but I do feel like I'm often codependent, especially if we're having an argument, and I do want to go to that, our arguments and conflict resolution.
That's what it said.
So if we've got folks that are kind of still tuned in and listening to this and thinking about it in their own lives, I would imagine that they're saying, okay, let's get dirty. Let's get down and talk about when you're having a horrible argument, how do you deal with it? And if you, I don't know if these are effective ways to think about it, but I'm going to throw a question out at you around this. I was listening to a therapist named Sean McBride, who you probably know of, and he runs a couples counseling center, and he talks about, he uses the following metaphor around fights between couples, and I'm wondering if you think it's fair, that what happens around conflict resolution is if someone is drowning, God forbid, someone feels like they're drowning in not being understood, in anger, in stress, in anxiety, in being upset about the other person's actions, whatever it be. And the other person, instead of saying, oh my God, you're drowning, let me try to throw you a life preserver, let me get in the water with you and help you, starts to give you the facts about why you shouldn't be drowning. And so that's a somewhat complex metaphor, but that's how he describes it. For me, that resonated really deeply, on both sides. Being the one who feels like they're drowning at times, and then the one who feels like they're with someone who feels like they're drowning at times. It's like, you shouldn't be drowning, I didn't do that, or you shouldn't feel that, or that's not fair, or whatever. So before I go further, do you accept that metaphor that we can kind of depart from?
Do I accept it or do I agree with it?
Yeah, do you agree with it?
I completely agree with it, yes.
So that's it's a situation of paralysis because it's abject crisis, right? If you're really in a bad argument, or it doesn't always have to be an argument, by the way. Conflict can be a conflict of emotions, or one person is feeling something that's dramatically different from the other person. That's, in a sense, a conflict as well. So how do you begin to heal that? What in your view, well, let's just talk about us, can sometimes get us out of that situation where one of us is drowning and the other is really not helping?
So I think about this example a lot, and I would urge other listeners to do that as well, because the visual of it is very impactful in the way that you behave in your communication when you're fighting. It's truly imagine your partner as they're drowning, God forbid, in a pool. And you're just sitting there watching them, being the lifeguard, thinking, see, that's what happens when you don't listen to me. It doesn't matter that they don't listen to you because they're drowning. Like, it doesn't matter that you're right or that you're wrong because they're in this deep emotional pool of conflicting negative emotions. And it doesn't matter truly who is right or who is wrong. What it matters is how you deal with the situation at hand, how you react to it. And this I'm saying more to myself than anyone else out there. As I'm speaking out loud and noticing patterns of my communication in this relationship. For example, I know that today you have been extremely tired, extremely tired. And you said some things to me that if I wanted to, I could have easily picked a fight or have been upset. But I just, the things you said upset me, but I just listened. And I said to myself, you know what, it's not even worth it for me to speak or to affirm what you said, because I know that if you're in a better mental state, you would have never said it. You would have thought it, and you would have communicated it in a more efficient way that I would have understood and not been defensive about. But it's good sometimes to just sit and let people be without reacting.
So another thing, and first of all, yes, I appreciate you saying that. It's we had a very rough travel day and so forth, and so I have been very tired, and you're not kind of getting electrified by my comments has been great, and I appreciate that. One of the things that Sean McBride says about trying to kind of break that log jam is that the first step is self-awareness. And I think this is particularly difficult for men in terms of being aware on either side, whether you're the drowning person or even more importantly, I like the way you put it, you're the lifeguard in that moment. Just being able to take a moment and slow things down and feel what you're feeling. Being self-aware about, I'm really tired. Just knowing that, just acknowledging that to myself makes me more likely to understand that I might say something hurtful or that probably this is not the time to talk. Or being aware that I'm feeling extremely anxious, or being aware that I'm feeling emotional and hurt, but something that may not have to do anything, might not have to do with you at all, might have to do with the relationship with the sibling or something. And that first step of just taking a step back and being aware that, not to the person, self-aware, not I'm aware that Leah made me upset, but no, I'm aware of a feeling. I'm aware that I'm feeling right now, and then it kind of takes the power of that emotion away in terms of it's controlling me. Anyway, I thought I'd share that. I don't know if that's...
What's the specific situation where you use that tool?
So a couple of days ago, we had an argument where I think I spiraled. And I find that the times that I'm least effective in being able to acknowledge what's going on and be self-aware and listen is when I feel misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And so in this particular argument, and I don't know if you'll know, do you know which one I'm talking about? Yeah. So in this particular argument, I felt like fundamentally misunderstood. Now, that's it. Yeah. So in terms of my feeling, there were other elements to it. But I think if I had stopped and actually acknowledged to myself, you're feeling misunderstood, not Leia's misunderstanding you, not she's doing X or hurting you or it's not fair, all these things. Actually just sitting with the feeling, okay, you're feeling misunderstood, and that's a really difficult thing for you. And just sitting for a minute, then I think I could have been more rational about my reaction and communication.
I think that's a good example, and not a lot of people just sit with their feelings. You know, sometimes you're allowed to feel things and not share them with the world. And after, a couple of hours, you don't feel that way anymore. Sometimes it's good to do these internal processes that we have. It's good to have them be more of a conscious voice that's striving for good.
I think the toughest part for me is when we're in the midst of an argument, mm-hmm. both of us will have this really strong current of, at its most extreme, it could be rage. At a less extreme, it'll be like a blinding opinion or perspective. And it's so frigging hard to get out of that current when you're in it. And then often we'll look back on an argument that we had. I'll think, oh, I could have expressed it this way, or I could have talked about it in this way, but in the moment, it's so hard to do that.
Yes. Another practical life or couples advice is to never have conversations in the moment where the thing happens, because you're just triggered. You're activating your emotional brain. And I want to talk about something that's very difficult for me when we fight, and that's our communication style. So for me, because of the flow of overwhelm that I get, I prefer to not talk about things as they're happening, or in the moment that they're happening, or in the moment that I find out, in the moment I read, whatever. I prefer not to have it in that moment, because I know I'm not a good communicator. I'm sarcastic. I don't pay attention. I'm extremely defensive. I'm just not the best version of myself. That doesn't mean I'm wrong to be those things. I'm just not the best communicator in my relationship. And you, on the other hand, if you don't talk about things right away, if you don't whatever is happening between us, if you don't discuss it right then and there, it gets worse and worse. And for me, the more time passes, it gets easier and easier. So, riddle me that.
We need to take our next break, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's a whole area of therapy that focuses on just that, like the reaction to crisis in that moment. And then some people freeze, some people run away, and so forth. And just having some of those discussions with my therapist have been really helpful in reading about that. We're going to take our next break here. I'm here with my wife, Leah Tusman, who's our wonderful producer, and we're talking about conflict resolution in relationships and how we de-escalate and get out of the trauma of the moment. We'll be right back on Equal Footing.
I knew I loved you then, but you'd never know. 'Cause I played it cool and I was scared of letting go. I knew I needed you, but I never showed.
Equal Footing with Dove Tusman is sponsored by MDCS Dermatology, your experts in skincare. With 2 Manhattan locations and 4 offices in Long Island, including Plainview and Commack, the dermatologists and skincare surgeons at MDCS are proud to be affiliated with the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and New York Presbyterian Hospital. So schedule your next skin exam in one of MDCS's convenient New York area locations. To make an appointment, go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-DERM. That's 212-661-3376. You can even schedule a virtual video visit with MDCS's board-certified dermatologists from the comfort and safety of your own home. So go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-3376. And don't forget to mention Equal Footing for 15% off all cosmetic procedures.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on to. And I've been taught, but I'm keeping.
You're back on Equal Footing, and right before we went to the break, we were talking about trauma response. Like an argument starts, and all of a sudden, one person wants to shut down. They go into the other room and slam the door. And the other person leans forward and runs the door and screams and cries, we need to talk about this now. And you are not, if you're listening, you are not alone. Couples have really different responses to trauma.
Yes. The most common responses to trauma or conflict are the flight response, the freeze response, the fawn response, where these are, and the fight. I apologize. The fight. So it's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, otherwise known as the 4 F's of conflict resolution. Now, we won't bore you with, or I won't bore you with the details of what all of those mean, but it's really good to know which one you are, like how you respond to stress or overwhelm when it comes to your partner, and you read more about it and see how you can adapt your behavior somehow.
Yeah, I think it's really important to study this. If you're not doing therapy, it's pretty easy to look up online, and my bet is that it'll resonate with you right away, because we have been in relationships. You'll have someone, you may have see one of the responses in your spouse, and you may have a different type of response with your boss at work, a different type of response with a parent, and we often kind of adjust our whole lives based on the type of response that we saw our parents do. So for one really important learning experience for me in our relationship has been that I know that I have a combination. I often have like a fawn response where I want to like make sure everything's okay and try to get things back to an okay place. Like I'm, fawning, please, and trying to get back to an okay place. Even if I'm feeling hurt or misunderstood, my that's a default place and then I know that to some extent I've learned this over the years that's been a response to the fact that both of my parents have a flight response, or at least have had it towards their life, so that when there's conflict, they just go away or shut down or not talk or close the door or get in the car or whatever. And for someone that's seen that as a child, that causes this like traumatic response of like, okay, please don't go. Like, even if you've hurt me, please don't go. Don't get in the car. Don't close the door. And I think just understanding that has been freeing. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't fall into the same pattern. But at least just being aware of the pattern.
And the funny thing about being conscious on which pattern you fall into, it helps you change. It helps you be more present in the moment and identify with another category if you so wish.
Yeah, and I'm going to sound a little bit like a fanboy at this point of Sean McBride, but I do want to get to that next step he talks about in terms of the healing from the kind of the drowning, the metaphor of one partner drowning and the other throwing facts at them instead of jumping in the water.
Yeah, that's a very good point. He uses the SMART method, which stands for self-awareness. The M stands for managing your feelings. The A stands for...
Let's start on the M for a sec, because we talked about self-awareness, and that's that first step of, okay, this is how I'm feeling.
Right.
This next part of the acronym of managing your feelings, that was a breakthrough for me in listening to him. Because, okay, now I'm self-aware. I am feeling misunderstood. I'm talking about this fight we had, seems like today. I think it was actually yesterday. 2 days ago, we were traveling overseas. So now I'm feeling misunderstood. Now what do I do with that feeling? That's managing the feeling. And understanding that the emotion is not me, and that I can separate from the emotion, realize that I'm having it, and not have it control me is the way I've understood the management. Not suppressing it or pretending I'm not feeling it. Saying, okay, this is something I'm feeling. Just let me sit with that for a little bit. Let me ride that through till I'm feeling a little different, like that emotional management.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That emotional management correctly of just giving yourself some time out and time to think and process.
Now, here's something that's really screwed up about me, and you know this, I think, is that I have tended in my life, and it's creeped into our relationship, to try to do the other way around, which is, and he's going to get, we'll get to the rest of the acronym of SMART, and he talks about being aware of the other feelings, but I will try to manage my partner's emotion. And that's anyway, we'll get there in a minute, but that's not what the M means. The M means managing your own emotion. And what is the A in SMART?
A stands for awareness of what your partner is feeling. So,
and not manage it, just being aware.
So an understanding of how your partner is feeling. Now you can go deeper and think, why is my partner feeling that? But once you acknowledge what your partner is feeling, two things happen. A, you validate their feelings, which is great for conflict resolution. And B, you see that they are detached from their feelings. Like, they are not just this angry red person. They're a person that's experiencing anger. So when you're aware of your partner's feelings, it opens a lot of doors, even for growth for yourself. If you think you're right, just being aware of your partner's feelings can sometimes make you think twice.
Right. So going back to this argument that we had in the last couple of days, that's the second step is, okay, now I'm aware I feel misunderstood, and then I'm aware of the feeling, whether it's right or wrong or justified or not, I'm aware of the feeling. Mm-hmm. And here now, in this next step, I'm aware of your feeling, which is your feeling, well, I don't want to say, how are you feeling in the moment of that fight? So I want to kind of test whether I'm right or not. Or you want me to say it first?
How was I feeling vis-a-vis your feelings?
No, how are you feeling? I was feeling misunderstood, and you were feeling?
I was feeling slightly apathetic.
Apathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that triggers, that's that flight kind of thing of like, okay, it didn't seem apathetic, but I do understand what you mean. I wanted to engage, you wanted to engage less.
Yeah, maybe not apathetic. Maybe that's not the right word, because it sounded like I didn't want to engage. It just felt like there was no point in engaging. This is something that we thought about before. This is something that we agreed we would change. So I think I felt like a little defeated.
Yeah, that would have been. I would have acknowledged that you felt defeated, and kind of disappointed, as well. So now, where we are in that conflict resolution is no one's right or wrong at this point in the process. We're just acknowledging the way the other is feeling. What's next? Next
is reading emotions of the other, but then together.
Yeah, so this is the hardest part, because now this is actually the resolution part. So my understanding of that, and I'm going to test this with you, is that it's now, instead of trying to correct your perception, it is trying to get inside of your reality. And this is where Sean McBride starts to talk about jumping in the pool with the drowning person. Mm-hmm. Not to drown yourself, but to help them. Mm-hmm. So now, this is me, and this is something that I still suck at. Mm-hmm. And I know that I've got to break through. And that is, now I need to feel the disappointment. So if you're feeling defeated, disappointed, betrayed, whatever it is that you're feeling, we've been through this before, I'm aware of how I felt misunderstood. I'm aware now how you feel, but that's not enough. Now I got to get into the pool with you and actually feel the disappointment.
Another way to look at it, to make it more tangible, is to literally feel what your partner is thinking in their mind. Like, try to imagine what thoughts are going through their heads. Try to imagine how this thing makes them feel. Try to really be in their body, because you know them better than anyone else. Try to be in their body, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how strongly you disagree. Try to be in their body for this time, and I can almost guarantee you your whole attitude will change. It's very difficult.
My therapist, a therapist I actually worked with a number of years ago, said it this way: sympathy is for the classroom. Like, you're like reading about some horrible historical slight to an ethnic group or what have you, that you can have great sympathy. Sympathy is not helpful in relationships. It's empathy that's needed. Mm-hmm. And so what I take from that, the R in SMART, because we've been through self-awareness, managing your feeling, awareness of what your partner's feeling, that's the S and the M and the A, and now we're on to the reading the other, is actually having true empathy. Mm-hmm. And if you're listening and thinking about a fight that you've had recently, this is so difficult, because it means putting behind least to the moment, you can always come back to it, your own narrative, your own perspective, and actually assuming the other person's narrative. And we could, I'm going to get philosophical for a moment, but I think this is much needed on lots of stages. I mean, we had a show a couple weeks ago about the Gazan conflict. We had Rabbi Simon Jacobson on not that long ago talking about the need for empathy, and that type of conflict doesn't mean you have to agree, doesn't mean you have to love the position of the other, doesn't mean even that you're giving up an enemy stance in the most extreme example, but you're actually feeling empathy. And often from there, things dissolve and get better.
So what's something you empathize about me?
Well, I mean, so many things, but I think to go in the vein of that fight, even as we're on the show, and you know, this show came up independent of that, but as always, our life circumstances, you know, influence our thinking, and at least subconsciously. It's almost like a literal response in my body. Like I can breathe a little bit differently because I can feel what you were feeling, and I can just be still with that. And there's sadness there because I can feel the disappointment and the feeling of being defeated. Mm-hmm. But there's also peace. We talked about Shalom Bayis in the beginning of the program. There's also peace because what's worst for me personally is the confusion. It's what goes in my fawn response. It's like the confusion of not knowing why someone's upset, or not knowing how this is going to end, or just that anxiety of the not knowing or feeling misunderstood. There's some peace in knowing at least why you're upset.
Yes. Because then you are able to assess the situation better, and the things you know are easier than the things you don't know. You know, the monster in your head is the monster in your head because you don't share it with other people. I'm not saying that it's easier once you talk things out, but it's certainly easier to talk things out than to let them, steep for quite a while.
Now so quickly before we get to the last, the T in SMART and the SMART method for conflict resolution, could you empathize or, get into the pool with me around my feeling of being misunderstood in that fight, or is that possible?
So that's a very interesting thing because I can definitely get in the pool with you, but sometimes getting in the pool with someone means denying yourself of being in that pool instead of your partner. So I can totally empathize why you felt misunderstood, but at the same time, I can empathize with myself why I wish that what you felt very different, why I wish you felt completely understood and I was the one that was in the pool drowning. You know what I mean?
So that sounds to me like that's still, first of all, yes, when you said, do I know what you mean? Of course I know what you mean, because it's really hard to get out of the stance of, I'm in the pool with you, but my pool is deeper and scarier. Like I totally get that. That barrier is always where I get caught up. Mm-hmm. So I feel what you're feeling, but that doesn't negate the way I'm feeling, and then you get back into escalation. Yeah. So for me, the de-escalation is actually putting it aside. Yes. It's not like you're not allowed to feel that again, but truly putting it aside.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. I didn't mean, feeling bitter about being in the pool. I just meant the validation of your feelings is also right, and if you want your partner to be in the pool with you, you should communicate about that. Okay, so
the T in SMART is together. Together we journey, together we adventure, together we get through things, together we live, and just understanding, I guess you said it actually, that it's really about both people's experience and sending a life, go back to the original metaphor, putting out a life preserver and getting in the pool with each other in their pain and feeling. So let's take a couple of listener questions before we end. We were you're on a roll there. I'm going to give you the mic, and we'll ask you as a therapist.
Do it.
So Juan, who's listening from South America, and I'm translating from the Spanish, says that this discussion seems applicable only to relationships between adults that are married, etc. Are these conflict resolution protocols applicable in the same way? I'm not speaking to the mic. So here we go. I passed you the mic, and then I was talking to Ether. That are these conflict resolutions applicable in the same way to relationships with siblings and others that you're not romantically involved with? Do you think Sean McBride's SMART method is applicable to non-romantic relationships?
Oh, absolutely. I think you can replace the word romantic partner with friend, sister, brother. You can still feel their emotions. You're still aware of what they are feeling. You're still reading their emotions. So, yeah, I completely believe that the SMART method could also be a platonic method.
Daniel asked, when do you know the crossing over point from conflict to a relationship being over?
Wow, that is a beautiful question to end the show with. And I think you just know I can't pinpoint a specific time where I thought, okay, this is over, because every time, meaning more than the other times, because every time we've fought, I've been, oh, okay, this is over now. So it's like this constant loop.
Wow. You think that when we fight?
Not all the time, but yeah, an extreme part of me does that.
Okay, so what's the answer to Daniel, or is there not one?
For me, it's over when you say goodbye. When the feeling of being separated brings you more peace than the feeling of being together.
I think and we don't have a rabbi on the show. I'm not going to pretend to be an authority in Jewish wisdom, but I think from a Jewish perspective, if you're married to someone, that's going to be a very, very extreme circumstance where there is there's something so fundamentally broken that the good work that can come from healing is not, I guess, I don't know, not worth it, or not something to engage in. But it's probably more so, I would say, from a Jewish perspective than from a postmodern perspective, general society, that crossing over point would be much later. How did you feel about doing this? Thanks for getting behind getting in front of the mic and out of the studio.
I feel less conflictual.
Well, we'll catch everyone next week. Thanks for being on Equal Footing.
I could offer you a warm embrace to make you feel my love. When the evening shadows and the stars appear, and there is no one there to dry your tears, I could hold you for a million years to make you feel my love. I know you haven't made your mind up yet, but I will never do you wrong. I've known it from the moment that we met. No doubt in my mind where you belong. I go hungry, I go black and blue, I go crawling down the avenue. No, there's nothing that I wouldn't do to make you feel my love.